Hi, my name is Carly Minnick, and I am here today with 100 Days of RVA Reads in conjunction with PBS and WCVE. The book that I'm going to be talking about today is Flowers in the Attic. I read Flowers in the Attic first when I was about 12 years old, which is probably a little young for the content involved, but it definitely turned me into the reader that I am today. And so I just want to talk to you a little bit about why I love it so much. I have it on my phone because it's easier to have it with you at all times when it's on something that's already attached at your hip. So excuse me, but I'm going to use some passages from here. Something I found in an article by Tammy Oler regarding the reason why this novel is so appealing to teenage readers was worded better than I could have ever worded it. So I'm just going to read what she said. The question is, so why was Flowers in the Attic so uniquely appealing to its first teenage readers? The novel is narrated by Kathy Dollenganger, who is imprisoned with her siblings at the age of 12 and finally escapes at the age of 15. It's a harrowing tale of abuse and neglect that includes beatings, starvation, and poisoning. It's also notoriously the story of an incestuous love affair between Kathy and her older brother that culminates in a sexual assault. Sure, these shockingly novel themes attracted readers, but the emotional payoff for teens is much deeper than the thrill of reading something taboo. In large part, Flowers in the Attic drew its power because it gave a voice to a visceral, adolescent feeling of being held hostage by your own family. So, that to say, the content of this novel is a little salacious and pretty scandalous, but because of that, it definitely draws in the page turner aspect. It was something that I had never read before. It was a concept that had never been introduced to me before because it was so advanced in its descriptions of things that I had never heard about. And for that, so much of it I'm sure I didn't understand, and rereading it as an adult, it's a very different novel. But because it was so different than the Judy Blume books or Sweet Valley High or other things that I had read, because that was what everybody else was reading, it became this sort of, it was taboo. It was something that wasn't being talked about. It was something that was just totally outside of the world that I occupied. And it created this idea that reading can be an escape and can make you part of a different world that is so different from your own. And I think that that is valuable, whether or not I would say Flowers in the Attic is one of the greatest novels ever written. I don't know, but I've read it many times, enough so that I have it on my phone. And it definitely gets referenced in pop culture pretty regularly because of the content. And so something else that I wanted to talk about today is a scene in the novel where Kathy, who's the oldest daughter, is being punished by the grandmother, who has, so they're all trapped in the attic because the mother is hiding them from her father in order to gain her inheritance back. It's a very complicated plot, but basically there are 4 kids who are being hidden away and sort of mentally and physically abused by a grandmother who would have preferred that they were never born because of the relationship between their mother and their father, who is recently deceased. So there's a scene where Kathy is being vain. The grandmother is also very strict about them not breaking any of the 10 Commandments and not doing anything that would be considered non-biblical. So her vanity is considered a sin. So the grandmother wants to punish her, and it's also talked about constantly in the novel how beautiful all of the kids are. They've got this beautiful shiny blonde hair. They're just textbook gorgeous. They were referred to as the dolls previously, before they get put in the attic. And so it's just constantly referenced throughout the novel how beautiful the kids are, and Kathy's hair is so important to her. And so as punishment for the sin that she committed by being vain, the grandmother comes in and does something to punish her. So I'm going to read a passage about that. I tried to see my reflection in the shimmering mirror across the way, yet when I tried to turn my swollen head, it refused to budge. And always before I went to sleep, I spread my hair out on the pillow so I could turn my head and nestle my cheek in the sweet-smelling silkiness of very pampered, well-cared-for, healthy, strong hair. It was one of the sensual things I enjoyed, the feel of my hair against my cheek to take me into sweet dreams of love. And yet today, there was no hair on my pillow. Where was my hair? The scissors, they still lay on the dresser top. I could vaguely see them. Swallowing repeatedly to clear the way, I forced out a small cry, uttering Chris's name, not Mama's. I prayed to God to make him let my brother hear. Chris, I finally managed to whisper in the strangest, gritty voice. Something is the matter with me. My whispered, weak words roused Chris, though I don't know how he heard. He sat up and sleepily rubbed his eyes. What do you want, Kathy? He asked. I mumbled something that took him from his bed, and in his rumpled blue pajamas, his hair a golden mop, he ambled over to my bed. He jerked up short. He drew in his breath and made small, gasping sounds of horror and shock. Kathy, oh my God. His cry sent shivers of fear down my spine. Kathy, oh, Kathy, he moaned. As he stared and I wondered what he had seen that had made his eyes bulge, I tried to lift my leaden arms and felt my swollen, heavy head. Somehow I managed to get my hands up there, and that's when I found a loud voice to scream. Really scream. Over and over again I howled like someone demented until Chris ran to gather me in his arms. Stop, please stop, he sobbed. Remember the twins. Don't scare them. Please don't scream, Kathy. They've been through so much, and I know you don't want to scar them permanently, and you will if you don't calm down. It's all right. I'll get rid of it. I swear on my life that I'll get that tar out of your hair. He found a small red prick on my arm where the grandmother had plunged in a hypodermic needle to keep me asleep with some drug, and while I slept she had poured hot tar on my hair. She must have gathered it all in a neat bucket before she used the tar, for not a strand was left free of the gook. Chris tried to keep me from looking in the mirror, but I shoved him away, and I had to stare with my mouth agape at the horrible black blob that was my head now. Like a huge wad of black bubble gum chewed and left in an unsightly mess. It even ran down my face and streaked my cheeks with black tears. I looked, and I knew he'd never get the tar out. Never. Corey woke up first, ready to run to the windows and draw aside the closed draperies and peek outside to see the sun that kept hiding from him. He was out of bed and ready to dash to the window when he saw me. His eyes widened, his lips parted, his small fluttering hands reached upward to rub at his eyes with fists, and he was staring at me again with so much disbelief. Kathy, he managed finally, is that you? I guess it is. Why is your hair black? Before I could reply to that question, Carrie was awake. Oh, she howled. Kathy, your head looks funny. Big tears came to glisten her eyes and slide down her cheeks. I don't like your head now, she wailed, and then began to sob as if the tar were on her hair. Calm down, Carrie, said Chris in the most ordinary, everyday tone. It's only tar in Kathy's hair, and when she takes a bath and shampoos her hair, it'll be the same as yesterday. When she does that, I want you two to eat oranges for breakfast and look at TV. Later on, we'll all eat real breakfast when Kathy's hair is clean. He didn't mention our grandmother for fear of instilling in them even more terror of our situation. So they sat on the floor, close as bookends, supporting only each other, peeled and ate oranges, sections, losing themselves in the sweet nothingness of cartoons and other Saturday morning violence and foolishness. So shortly after that, the brother tries really hard to get the tar out of the sister's hair, and it goes on for quite some time, and it ends in her having to cut off all of her gorgeous blonde hair, which is symbolic for loss of innocence in a lot of ways. The coming of age is sort of inevitable as things are changing, the relationship that's developing between she and her brother, who are the support system for one another, but ultimately her beauty being taken away from her as a subplot, I guess, within the ultimate novel. That's just sort of an underlying theme, the loss of beauty due to the circumstance of being trapped in an attic. So that ties in a little bit, I guess, to what I do, because I do hair and I cut hair every day, and certainly not in a way of beauty loss, but in a way of creating a new person. So shortly after she has all of her hair cut off and she goes through the trauma of that, she becomes a very strong person, and ultimately it leads to somewhat victorious ending and 19 other books. So she definitely survives. She doesn't have long, beautiful golden hair anymore, but she does by the second book. And so I think for me that resonates because it's this idea of creating a new identity, and maybe the standard of beauty being this long, beautiful golden hair, and then redefining herself and adapting despite the circumstance is valuable, because that's so much of what I think we do with ourselves when we need a change or when we need to become someone newer or stronger or different. We can recreate our own beauty and redefine that. Obviously not at the cost of having someone put tar in our hair first, but or hopefully not. But that's, I guess, how I'll tie it into what I do. And I encourage you to get out there and read. It doesn't have to always be textbooks. It doesn't always have to be historic. It doesn't always have to be, autobiographies. You can read things like this and it's okay because you're still reading. And some of the greatest page turners, I think, have a little bit of that salacious or scandalous nature to them. And I've always loved mysteries. I love Agatha Christie. I love reading murder mystery novels, and that's such a popular thing in fiction right now. So it doesn't have to be Flowers in the Attic, but if you need something that's a page turner that's not exactly, the New York Times bestseller, then look around because it exists. And I encourage you to keep reading. Thank you, Richmond Public Library, for having me.